Hello and thanks for clicking on the video. We're going to make some great Southern homemade buttermilk biscuits here. First, a couple of quick words. This started from a recipe handed down by my grandfather, Roy McElgay, who taught my dad, Reverend Coy Garrett, how to make biscuits. My dad taught me. And this is sort of the latest version, the latest generation of the recipe, so we hope you enjoy. A quick shout out to Matt and Carrie Jackson, who encouraged me to make this video. And an extra word here, if you like the biscuits, hopefully they're going to work great for you. There is a link below this video that if you see this before January of 2015, there's a chance to donate to a very worthy cause we have at First United Methodist Church of Fuquay-Varina. We're getting ready for a Stop Hunger Now event, so if you want to donate, that's a great place to go. If you see this later down the road, because as you know, YouTube videos never die, one other thing you could do. I'm actually making a lot of biscuits tonight. And some of those are being sent, about 60 of those are being sent tomorrow to another mission that we have called Love Thy Neighbor, to help some folks who don't have enough to eat. Hopefully, if you like these biscuits, maybe you want to make a few extra yourself for folks who are in need. That would be very, very cool. Okay, enough of the talking. Before we get down to business, we've got to talk ingredients and equipment. That's very, very important. Let's start with the ingredients. And the first thing is flour. Now, I use self-rising flour, and for some folks that may be cheating a little bit, but I really like how this works. And there's two different brands that I really like the best. One is Gold Medal flour, the self-rising flour. You can generally get this just about anywhere. If you're in the southern United States, though, you may want to try White Lily flour. It works very well, too. The self-rising flour will help you with the biggest thing on biscuits, and that's looking for height. And that's a real important thing when you're making the biscuits. Now, I do add a little bit of extra baking powder. I shouldn't have to. It's already in the self-rising flour, but I like to maximize my height, so I throw a little bit in just for the fun of it. One other thing I throw in that may sound a little bit unusual is some confectioner's sugar. There is salt that's in self-rising flour, and you don't want it to be too salty. Now, I'm not adding enough to make this sweet. There's no sweetness to the bread here, but it does sort of cut into that extra salty taste, and that helps out a little bit. Now let's talk measurements of these before we get to the other ingredients. 4 cups of self-rising flour, 2 tablespoons of baking powder, 2 tablespoons of confectioner's sugar. We're going to sift all of that together. So again, 4 cups, 2 tablespoons, 2 tablespoons. And to that, we're going to add some unsalted butter. Again, you don't want to have too much salt. There's a nice salty taste of biscuits. You don't want it to go too crazy. Unsalted butter, I love Land O'Lakes. We use 2 sticks of unsalted butter in the dough. Save another stick out for melting and brushing on the biscuits before and after you cook it. So we'll see some more of this in just a little bit. The 2 sticks that you put into the dough need to be chilled. That's very important. This is going back in the refrigerator until we're absolutely ready to use it. Another thing that's going to stay chilled until we're ready to use it is the buttermilk. Now, get real whole buttermilk. There is low-fat buttermilk out on the market, but we're not making health food. We're making biscuits. So 2 cups and a smidge extra of whole buttermilk will be really, really wonderful. The last thing that we've got, and it's sort of kind of an ingredient, not really, is some cooking spray for the pan. I used to use Crisco in the recipe. That was used by my grandfather and my dad. And you would try to sort of grease the pan with some Crisco. The problem with that is it makes the bottoms a little too crispy, at least for my taste. So a little light spray of Pam on the pan will do a whole lot of good. One last time on the ingredients here. 4 cups of flour, 2 tablespoons of baking powder, 2 tablespoons of confectioner's sugar, 2 sticks of butter in the dough with an extra stick saved for melting later, 2 cups and a little smidge extra of your buttermilk, whole buttermilk, and of course the little Pam spray for the pan. That's it for the ingredients. We're going to come back in just a second with the equipment. And we're back to talk equipment here. Now, you've already seen the little mat I've got spread out here. You can get just about anything, a plastic mat, a silicone mat. When I was little and watching my dad and granddad make the biscuits, they would use wax paper spread out here. But you just need something, a surface to work your dough on. You're not going to work the dough a lot. You'll see that in a little bit, but you need some place that gets it started. Let's talk pans real quick because we mentioned throwing some Pam on the pan. I love half-sheet pans. You can get these at any restaurant supply store, and these days you can get them pretty much at any big box store. I really like these. Do not get an insulated pan. If you do, the bottoms will not cook properly. Also, I don't like using non-stick pans. Get a real one of these. They're cheap, they're easy, they do a world of good. Now, obviously we've got to start measuring things out. So I love to use a 1 cup scoop, and here's why. Most of that wonderful flour we talked about just a little bit ago is pre-sifted. And if you just grab a cup out, you may not actually be getting enough flour for this recipe. So I like to pack the flour down and sort of re-sift it later. And for me, I know I'm being silly here, but the extra surface area for this scoop helps me out. So I like measuring out my cups of flour using this. Then, of course, you're eventually going to need something to re-sift the flour. Now, this is an old antique. It's got a screen at the bottom, a little wire hoop in here, and a little crank that makes it go. Obviously, this is a little bit rusty, so you might not want to use that particular one. You can use any kind of sifter that you want, handheld or whatever later, but you'll want to sift it back out, and this is the way you'll get your other dry ingredients together. You'll see that in just a little bit. For more measuring, obviously, you'll need a tablespoon. This is sort of a multi-spoon measure here that's got the tablespoons here and teaspoons and other things elsewhere. You'll need that. And of course, you'll need to put it all in a big mixing bowl of some sort. Also, you're going to need a dough blender. This is wonderful, particularly when you're working with butter, because that chilled butter is sort of hard to work. It's hard to break down to the size you want, and you don't want that butter to melt. This will get you done quick enough that everything will be perfectly cool. So I love that little dough blender. More measuring stuff. A 2-cup measure here, and when we're talking 2 cups and a smidge, I'm just meaning 2 cups and just a little bit more to make it work right. You may also want a 2nd cup, not so much for measuring, but to use to melt your butter in. And I love a silicone brush for this. The regular brushes, you may get a bristle that gets in the dough, and who wants that? This is perfect for brushing on that melted butter a little bit later. Obviously, you're going to need a rolling pin. And the big thing you're going to need is something to cut your biscuits. Now, this is my favorite little thing. I got this at a restaurant supply store. It's a professional biscuit cutter. What I really like, though, is the height. This is much larger, much higher than any biscuit you're going to make. And it's got little air holes here, so it's not going to smash down your biscuits. Whatever you use, that's the key. You don't want to smash the biscuits before you start trying to make them rise. So I love this thing, but if you don't get that, a cookie cutter is okay as long as it doesn't have a lid on it. This cookie cutter I really like, and I'll tell you why I like it. Not because it's got the open top on it, but because it's broken. You see, that means that goes, and I've just got a nice little ring to work with. And this I've actually used before when I'm making smaller biscuits. You've got no top on it. You can still smash it down and get your biscuits cut the way you want. So some folks will use a glass. Some people will actually hold the dough in their hands, and the old term would be to choke a piece of the biscuit off till you could cook it, and they would call them choke biscuits. I never got into that. This is what I go for. And of course, finally, you will need something to get those lovely, delectable biscuits out of the pan when you're done. So that's the equipment. Now what we've got to start doing is putting all this together, measuring things out, getting ready to cook. So we'll be right back with that. Okay, we're ready to start measuring out our ingredients. I'm going to get the first scoop of flour here. If you notice, I'm going to start packing it down. There we go. Okay, before I start sifting this back in, though, I'm going to get in the sifter our other ingredients. So I've got to get 2 tablespoons of the baking powder. And a couple of tablespoons of the sugar here. And there we go. And then what we're going to do is start sifting this all together here. And then after this, we're going to go ahead and get the rest of the flour and sift that in. Remember, it's going to be 4 cups of flour, 2 tablespoons of the baking powder, and 2 tablespoons of the powdered sugar. So I'll let you skip having the rest of the flour come in. We'll come back in just a minute when we're ready to add the butter. From this moment on, things are going to start to get a little bit messy. So you might want to take off your rings, make sure you got all your jewelry done, and we'll go down here to the dough. I'm going to go ahead and sort of stir this around a little bit with my fingers because I sifted those dry ingredients into the flour with the first scoop. Obviously, I'll put 3 more scoops of flour in here. But now we're ready to add in the butter. Now, this butter has stayed in the refrigerator until it's ready to be used. I don't know if it's true. There are at least some folks who believe that the reason it's important for the butter to be chilled is that if you divide this up or cut this up the way we're talking about, that it will be little, eventually produce little pockets of steam and help the flakiness of the biscuit. Whether that's true or not, I just know it works and you get really good biscuits that way. Now, 2 big sticks of butter, that's where this little beauty comes into play. It's the dough blender here. And what it does is help to cut this up. And what we're eventually going to do with this is we're trying to get this blended in with the, you also have to sort of push this back every once in a while. You're going to try to blend it in with the flour well enough that the flour takes on the consistency of cornmeal. Like you've got maybe little sticks of little things of butter about the size of a grain of rice in here. So we're going to work this for a little while and work it into the dough like this. And every once in a while you'll have to clean the blades out, but we're going to keep working this into the dough until we get that desired consistency. I'll spare you having to see the whole operation here, but trust me, it does take a few minutes, and we'll come back as soon as we're ready. If you thought we were messy before, it's about to get really, really messy here. We're getting ready to do the final steps of preparing the dough. But before you do that, you need to prepare your surface here. So get a little bit of flour here and sort of sprinkle it out here. You're going to need this in order to be able to do the small amount of working your dough that you're going to do. And we're not going to work the dough very much. That's one of the secrets here, is the more you work the dough, the worse off you're going to be. But we got to get our surface prepared here. Now, if you'll notice, this looks sort of like cornmeal right now. I don't know if you can tell that on the camera real well. And there are a few little chunks of butter in here. That's okay. But what we're about to do is to kick this up a notch and add in, we got all the butter in here. We're about to add in the buttermilk. And it's 2 cups and just a little bit over. Once we pour this in, we're not going to mix it much. We're just going to make sure that it combines. Not going to work the dough a whole lot. So you'll see that we're going to stay live for the whole thing here. Okay. Buttermilk is in, and again, time to get messy. All we're going to do here is just make sure that this combines properly. The more you work the dough, the more those glutens get to work in there, and then you wind up with a very tough biscuit. It's not very flaky. It's not very good. It doesn't cook well. You're just not going to like it. So all I'm going to do here is, it takes a little bit to make sure everything combines in here well. And once I've got that, enough that I can sort of make a mass of dough out of this thing, that's all that I'm going to do with it. And it needs just a little bit, it needs just a little, as I said, a little smidge extra to work all that dough and get all of it wet. You want a very nice, sticky, messy dough. Okay, I'm going to bring this out here. I know I'm blocking the camera view here, and I apologize for that. All right, now, as you can tell, it is very, very, very messy. We're going to put a little bit of flour on top of this, so it's at least a little bit more manageable. Now, again, we're not going to work this dough very much. You want to do just a little bit to enhance the flakiness. That's about it. So we're going to fold it a couple of times, and that's about all. So I'm going to fold it over once here, and sort of fold it again. Then we're going to flip this over. Looks like it's going to be, doesn't need any extra flour put on it this time. Sometimes you will have to do that. And flip it, fold it, and then fold it one more time. And guys, that's all the working we're going to do on this thing. That is it. If you do more than that, you will deeply, deeply regret it. Okay, so now what we're going to be doing is spreading this out and getting it ready to be cut. Now, you don't want to spread it out too thin, but you do want to try to spread it out fairly evenly, which is where this nice little rolling pin comes into play. And once we get this ready for you, we'll come back and start cutting biscuits, so stay tuned. We'll be right back. Okay, we're going to do a little bit of spraying the pan here. Get it sort of prepared. We'll set this aside for just a minute. And we'll start working the dough. By the way, I understand that some of our earlier clips, you may see a little four-legged assistant. She has not actually assisted on the biscuits, so don't worry. She just likes to get around and sort of check out what's going on. Biscuits here, you want to start from fairly close to the edge, and if you notice, I've got a fairly thick one. It's about 1 inch thick. That's not a bad one to start with. And then we're going to place these on the pan fairly close together, because what you really want to see is if they can't grow out, they're going to spread some direction. So if they can't go out, there's only one other place to go, and that's up. So what you want here are biscuits that are going to be fairly close to each other, no more than 1 inch apart, and you may even want to go closer than that. If you notice, I'm putting these things pretty close together. I'm trying to put 3 or 4 in a row. And I'll show you more of that in just a minute here. And we'll come back when we've got the pan full of biscuits. I cut most of the biscuits out, and you notice there's a lot of dough left here. You want to be careful about remolding this because, again, you don't want to work the dough too much. You may want to take a little bit of buttermilk in your hand here and use it to sort of work that dough a little bit so it'll combine together and make a nice little simple. So I'm using some of the dry flour here to get it to where I can work it. And that way you can sort of cut some more biscuits out of it and finish out that nice pan. So, there we go. Another biscuit. And believe it or not, this looks really fall apart-ish. It won't be so fall apart-ish when it cooks, hopefully. And I've got 15 biscuits over there. I'm going to throw an extra couple in here. That's a little too fall apart-ish. We're going to fix that up, and we'll put the last in, and I'll come right back when we've got the pan full. Now, there's a little bit of a tradition when we're making the biscuits. It was in my family. This is actually a bit large, but whatever dough you had over, we make a little biscuit, just sort of push it together for the kids. So I'll put that one in here. It's going to actually help hold a little bit more room and put everything where it'll rise up a little bit better. One other thing I do is, if you notice, I'm using my thumb to hit the center of each one of these biscuits. That's on purpose. You don't want the centers to rise too much, or they will tend to rise a lot, so you push it down, it'll work. Now, last important thing before you put it in the oven, is you take some melted butter. This is a half stick of butter that's melted, and brush it on top. Believe it or not, this is not only the last thing we do before we cook it, it's the first thing we do after we bake it. And you'll see that in just a little bit. But we're going to brush all this on here. And the one question I haven't answered so far is how hot an oven. 450 degrees Fahrenheit, for all of you who are on the good old USA system here. I'm not sure where that translates metric in case you're watching it somewhere else. But 450, oven is already preheated and it's ready to roll. So as soon as we're set, we'll put this in there. As far as timing, it takes anywhere from 15 to 20 minutes to cook. Generally, I'll start checking through the window of the door around 15 minutes. Rarely is it ready then. Generally, around 17, 18 minutes, it's nice. What you're looking for is a nice golden brown, light golden color on the tops of the biscuits. If you really are just dying to find out, you can always pull the pan out and double check the bottom of one of the biscuits on the edge just to make sure it's cooked as well. But you're just looking for that nice golden color. That'll let you know everything is set, and you will have some very beautiful homemade buttermilk biscuits. We'll come back after we cook. All right, we've got the biscuits out of the oven, and if you'll notice, they look, I don't know if you can tell on the camera, they look a little bit dry right now, and that's because they need that final coat of butter. Once this butter gets soaked in really nicely, it'll make all the difference. I can tell the difference between the last biscuits that I sort of smashed together from the dough and these other ones that were cut out by the biscuit cutter. There is a difference, and that's one reason why you want to try to cut fairly conservatively when you're going through the dough the first time, it does make a difference on how pretty your biscuits will be. One thing I did not mention earlier is that you do need to, at some point, let your biscuits sort of sit for a little bit before they go in the oven. You want to give them a chance to rise just a little bit on their own. You can tell the ones where the dough has been worked a little bit extra to make those little kids' biscuits, they didn't rise as much. That's the reason I told you don't work the dough very much. But the rest of them came out very, very nicely. And if you'll notice, hopefully the camera will pick this up, the more this butter gets soaked into the tops of the biscuits, the prettier the color becomes on here. So I'm going to take one of these biscuits out, one of the ones I like the best here. Stick this one right here. And bring it right over here. Now, what to serve it with? Well, you got a whole lot of choices. If you are in North Carolina, you're probably going to go a Bojangles route and put some bacon or some sausage or some ham in it with some cheese. That's really wonderful. As for me, right now, I'm just going to slice this open. I could actually just about pull it open. That's sort of flaky, nice steam coming off of here. And of course, after putting all that butter into it, what do you want to put on it? More butter. Let that melt in there. And then you can put in some of your favorite jellies or jams. I've got some homemade grape jelly here I'm going to throw on this. And then once I'm done here, I'm going to spread that out a little bit, and I'm going to let it cool for a minute, and then we'll give it a shot. If you can't tell from the camera here, this is already taking a nice golden color on here, which is exactly what we're looking for. And over here is the final result. By the way, this is regular milk. Buttermilk is wonderful to make biscuits with. Not my favorite thing to drink by itself. So let's give this a shot. That works. Pardon me. Anyhow, getting all choked up. Give this a shot. See if you like it or not. I think you will. The biggest thing here is don't overwork the dough. If you do that, you're going to be in good shape. Give it a shot. If you like it, remember that link below. If you see this before January 2015, donate to the cause. And if you really get good at making biscuits, make them for other people, especially for folks who need a little bit extra help. Thanks so much for joining us. And by the way, my four-legged assistant, Roxy, I have one other video on my personal channel. That's of her years ago taking off her own collar. You can check that one out as well. Thanks again for joining us, and leave your comments below.